Hi, I'm Lynn Cornell, and welcome to Journey Through the Bible Verse by Verse. Grab your Bibles and follow along as we study through each book of the Bible verse by verse and chapter by chapter. Now, I am using the Holman Christian Standard Bible, so if you're reading from a different Bible translation, the read is different, but the message will be the same. Now, we're going to continue in our study through the Gospel of Matthew, and we're in chapter 24, but before we get into this chapter, I want to read something from chapter 23. And remember, we're in the same setting. This is the last week and the week leading up to Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. The week started off with Jesus riding in on a donkey. Now, what's interesting about that is, of course, after performing all of the signs and the wonders, the miracles, demonstrating and displaying that he is the Messiah, that he is the Son of God, he rides in on the donkey. So why is that important or significant? The Jews and even his disciples were expecting the glorious Messiah, meaning this. They were expecting him to ride in, figuratively, on a white charger, and then break the yoke of Rome off of their necks and restore Israel to her glory. That's within their mind. There had been brewing, there had been stirring of expectation for that. Could have been from the preaching of John, could have been even going back as far as the birth of Jesus, when there was a lot of talk about Jesus being born, the King being born. But even before then, remember, when you go back and you look at, there were people who were expecting, they were yearning for the kingdom to appear. And what they got was Jesus riding on a donkey. But they still should have received him. They should have submitted to him. Why? Because he demonstrated that he was the Messiah. So, as a part of this rejection, here's Jesus. He makes this pronouncement, not only to the Pharisees and the scribes, but also the people. And this is what he said in verse 37. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, yet you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will never see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So this pronouncement, in light of their expectation, of course, is one that could be jarring. And I don't think the apostles have yet processed it. And we're going to see this in the next verse. But it is when they will fully sort of realize that their expectation is not going to be immediately realized or met, will be his death, burial, and then ultimately his resurrection. But in verse 1, 24th chapter, he says, as Jesus left and was going out of the temple complex, his disciples came and called his attention to the temple buildings. Then he replied to them, don't you see all these things? I assure you, not one stone will be left here on another that will not be thrown down. And again, this is sort of jarring because this was a great temple. In fact, they were really, in a sense, sort of raving over the architecture. So for Jesus to kind of dismiss it by saying it's going to be destroyed. Okay? And this temple, by the way, had been was constructed, it's referred to as the second temple, and it was built some 20 years before Jesus' birth. It was one of King Herod's accomplishments. By the time of this incident here, it had been under construction for 46 years and will be in continual construction for another some 35 years, just 6 or 7 years before Jesus' prediction or pronouncement that it would be destroyed. Now, so again, the disciples are probably kind of processing this, saying, well, what's going on? So in verse 3, it says, while he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples approached him privately and said, tell us, when will these things happen? Meaning the destruction of the temple. And what is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So they asked Jesus 3 questions. And so this chapter will be Jesus answering those 3 questions. And in doing so, he's going to give us a snapshot into end times, Bible prophecy, or eschatology, as it's theologically known, which means the study of end times. And of course, a Bible prophecy is a subject of great interest to Christians. But a lot of confusion surrounds Bible prophecy. And several reasons for that. But one, let's keep this in mind. Bible prophecy is not a hard subject. It is not a difficult subject. It is quite simple. Now, what it is exhaustive, meaning there's a lot of information. But we can sum up that information really in 2 areas. The primary focus of Bible prophecy is God's prediction, his revealing his plan and purpose for Israel. That's it. Old, new, that is the primary focus of Bible prophecy. And the second is how the church fits into that. And there is some understanding that needs to be here. So in other words, Jesus here in answering the question is going to give us a Jewish perspective here. He's speaking to the Jewish people about what prophecy or God has said concerning them. So in other words, there's some prophetic and utterances that have happened that reveals God's plan. So we're going to get a snapshot with this chapter. And one other thing too is that I think fulfilled prophecy becomes a bedrock of our faith. This is what I mean. Jesus just gave us a prediction, right? He just said that what you see here, meaning the temple, right, of Herod, is going to be completely destroyed. Now, when he said that, this was AD 30. Now, if you want to argue between AD 30 or an AD 33 date in terms of when Jesus was born, okay, fine, no problem. Okay, we're not going to get into that, in other words. But let's just say AD 30. Okay, so that's when he would say this. This is when this prediction was made. Matthew is writing this based upon his eyewitness account. He was there. He heard it. He heard this prediction. He's writing this around AD 50. And of course, all dates are not absolute. But my point is, as Matthew is writing this 20 years after Jesus predicted it, it still hadn't been fulfilled, and it won't be fulfilled for another 20 years. In other words, this came to pass in AD 70 when the Roman general Titus went in and completely leveled the city. Our perspective, however, 2,000 years later, we're able to read this and we can say this has happened. Matthew is a historic document. We have markers. We have fulfillment markers or prophetic markers that we can chart where we are prophetically. We can chart fulfill prophecy, and that strengthens our faith. So why do I believe Jesus is coming? I believe Jesus is coming because of what has come to pass. This came to pass in AD 70. This is fulfilled prophecy. And by the way, fulfilled prophecy sets God apart from any other God, any other religion. Any other God, any other religion. We're set apart. We're going to see other prophecies throughout our study, of course, of the Bible, but even in this 24th chapter, I'm going to dabble just a moment to show fulfilled prophecy. And that strengthens our faith for that. And one other thing, and we're going to see, is that I'm going to say as a caution, and this is what we're not going to do. We're not going to have a newspaper in one hand and then Bible prophecy in the other. We're going to stick to this is what God says. And then we can say, okay, has this happened? But you certainly cannot determine fulfilled prophecy by news account. That has been a great mistake to the church, at least in our time, for decades. And I'll explain this when we move on. And that's why I say we will keep prophecy simple. And thus we will understand it. We can understand what he is saying as we keep it simple. All right, we're going to pick up with verse 4 as Jesus begins to answer now the questions. So I'll see you in the next video.